It's my honor to welcome you to the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. Good morning to the U.S. Attorney, Berman, Mr. Sweeney of the FBI, Mr. Morgenthau, Ms. Solitzer, Ambassador Dayan, members of the museum's Board of Trustees, and our many distinguished guests. My name is Michael Glickman, and I have the privilege of serving as president and CEO of this remarkable institution, which today stands as New York's Holocaust Memorial Museum. This extraordinary location at the edge of Manhattan Island, the Museum of Jewish Heritage, is New York's contribution to the global responsibility to never forget. On this day, and every day, the museum honors the millions of victims of the Holocaust, those who perished and those who survived. We remember all that was lost, lives, families, and cultural treasures. On 9 other occasions, the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, has held ceremonies like this one, where paintings or artifacts stolen by the Nazis and their collaborators have been returned. We are grateful to host such gatherings, particularly today, where 20 years ago, our museum, dedicated by survivors, having now welcomed more than 2 million visitors, has emerged as the primary resource in New York for teaching and learning about the Holocaust, and has taken our place as the 3rd largest Holocaust museum in the world. The Nazis attempted to dehumanize and destroy the Jewish people, and we remember the Holocaust as a history of individuals. And this, in and of itself, is an act of resistance. From the most unjust of times, a measure of justice is restored today, and we are grateful to be part of this history. We're honored that Ms. Solitzer is providing us with the opportunity to showcase this painting in our galleries to visitors from around the world, helping this institution reintroduce a lost artwork to the public for the first time in nearly 80 years. Thank you to the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI and all of the parties involved for your tireless efforts to ensure that property stolen during the Nazi regime is returned to their rightful owners. Your work provides honor and hope to all Holocaust victims and their descendants. It is my pleasure to welcome United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jeffrey Berman, to the podium. Thank you for visiting.
Good morning. I'm Jeff Berman, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Today, it is my distinct privilege to be able to restore to its rightful owner a painting looted by the Nazis during World War II. The painting we are returning today, entitled Deux Femmes dans un Jardin, was painted in 1919 by Pierre-Auguste Renoir, one of the masters of French Impressionism. Deux Femmes was looted from the private collection of Alfred and Marie Weinberger in 1941 during the Nazi occupation of Paris. Since that time, the painting has changed hands many times, making its way around the world until it arrived here in New York. And today, after 3/4 of a century, we are finally able to return the work to its rightful owner, the Weinbergers' sole living heir, their granddaughter, Sylvie Solitzer. And we are thrilled to have Madame Solitzer here as our guest of honor. She flew from Paris just to be here for the ceremony. This is, I believe, Madame Solitzer's first trip to New York. Madame Solitzer, bienvenue. How is my pronunciation? My pronunciation, is it okay? Well, thank you for your honesty. To Madame's right is Robert Morgenthau, the iconic former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and former Manhattan District Attorney, and I'll have more to say about Mr. Morgenthau and his illustrious family a little later. And to Mr. Morgenthau's right is Bill Sweeney, Assistant Director in charge of the FBI's New York Field Office. I also want to recognize the Consul General of Israel in New York, Ambassador Danny Dayan. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for joining us here today. Now back to the painting. The work itself, painted in the last year of Renoir's life, is a fine example of his later landscapes. As early as 1910, Renoir was suffering from severe arthritis. Despite searing pains in his joints, Renoir continued to paint, sometimes requiring a paintbrush to be tied to his hand because he could not otherwise hold it. This would have been one of his last works that Renoir completed before his death. Alfred Weinberger was an avid and prominent art collector in pre-war Paris. He acquired Deux Femmes, along with a number of other Renoir paintings, in 1925. At the outbreak of the Second World War, the Weinbergers fled Paris to Aix-les-Bains in the French Alps, but they stored their collection of paintings in Paris at the Morgan Bank. On December 4th, 1941, the Weinberger collection was seized by the Nazis, and on September 10th, 1942, the collection was transferred to the Jeu de Paume, a pre-war museum in Paris controlled by the Eisenstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, or ERR. The ERR was created by the Nazis to confiscate on a massive scale artworks and other cultural holdings of Jews and other enemies of the Third Reich. The ERR meticulously registered and identified the artworks that it plundered, including providing detailed descriptions of those works and even photographing them, leaving behind a detailed record of the works that they stole. It is a grim irony that these records, recently made publicly available online, have provided a path for surviving victims and their heirs to seek justice. Since 2010, Madame Sulitzer has actively sought to recover the stolen works from her grandfather's collection. When Madame Sulitzer learned in 2013 that Deux Femmes was being put up for auction at Christie's, she made a claim for the work. After an investigation by my office and the FBI, the purported owner of the work voluntarily agreed to relinquish its claim to the Deux Femmes, and as a result, we are able to return the painting to Madame Sulitzer today. The FBI's art crime team played an important role in investigating Madame Sulitzer's claim and securing the painting's voluntary return. One reason that we hold these events upon the return of missing or stolen artworks is to celebrate these agents' dedication and proficiency, and to get the word out to the public that the FBI's team is ready, willing, and able to help right the wrongs of history. I'd like to thank Bill Sweeney for the excellent relationship that the Southern District of New York has with the FBI's New York Field Office. It is an especially fitting honor to have the legendary former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and Manhattan District Attorney Robert Morgenthau on the podium today, given his family's profoundly deep connections to the fight against Nazism. In 1943, while Mr. Morgenthau was fighting overseas, his father, U.S. Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau, Jr., approved a plan to rescue European Jews. Tragically, his efforts were obstructed by the State Department and British Foreign Office. Yet Henry Morgenthau and his staff persisted. In January 1944, they bypassed the State Department and confronted President Roosevelt, who then ordered the creation of the War Refugee Board, which saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of European Jews. While it is impossible to list all of Robert Morgenthau's accomplishments from his lifetime of public service, I will note something of particular relevance to today's ceremony. In 1998, Mr. Morgenthau's DA's office seized several paintings looted by the Nazis. That seizure prompted a major international conference on Nazi confiscated art, which in turn led to far greater cooperation and record sharing among nations. Every day, as I enter my office, I pass a portrait of Mr. Morgenthau, and every day I am inspired. We all owe a deep debt of gratitude to Mr. Morgenthau and his family for their service to our country. would like to thank Michael Glitman and his staff at the Museum of Jewish Heritage for hosting us in this beautiful space overlooking the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. The museum, dedicated to educating visitors about Jewish life before, after, and during the Holocaust, is perfectly suited for today's event. I would also like to thank my former law partner, Judah Gribbetz, for helping to arrange this ceremony, and thank him for writing the Timetables of Jewish History, a book to which I often refer. I want to acknowledge the excellent work of our AUSA on this case, Noah Falk, a career prosecutor who worked diligently to ensure that this painting could ultimately be returned to Madame Sulitzer. And I also want to thank the wonderful supervision of this case by Andrew Adams and Alexander Wilson, the chiefs of our money laundering and asset forfeiture unit. This is a joyous event, bringing some measure of justice to Madame Sulitzer and her family. Yet the joy of this event is tempered by the events giving rise to it. So today, while we celebrate the just return of this painting, we also remember the uniqueness of the Holocaust and reaffirm our commitment to ensure the words, "Never forget, never again," never ring hollow. Bill?
Thanks, Jeff, and thank you. It's a privilege, absolute privilege for me to be here today. Again, my name's Bill Sweeney. I'm the head of the FBI's New York field office. Since being taken from Alfred Weinberger by the Nazis in 1941, this painting by Renoir has traveled from Paris to Johannesburg to London and Zurich, eventually making its way to New York City in 2013. The Nazis took several items from Mr. Weinberg's collection, including 4 other paintings by Renoir. He was able to escape France and survive the war, but then he spent the rest of his life trying to recover the items taken from him. He was able to find much of the collection, but never this particular piece. The extraordinary journey that this small work of art has made around the globe and through time ends today when we get to return it to Mr. Weinberg's last remaining heir, his granddaughter, Sylvie Sulitzer. Thank you, Sylvie, for traveling all this way. The atrocities that took place during World War II at the hands of the Nazis cannot be summed up in a few words. They murdered, tortured, and plundered during their attempt to take over Europe and the world. In the process, they also carried out smaller acts of evil behavior, stealing hundreds of thousands of these pieces of priceless artwork. Some of those pieces are lost to our culture forever. However, we take a small bit of pride in returning a painting looted during the war, decades after peace was declared, knowing we can help repair some of the destruction during that time. On behalf of the New York field office of the FBI, I'd like to thank members of Christie's Art Gallery here in New York for their diligent work in helping to return the painting. We'd also like to thank the U.S. Attorney's Office for their hard work and the Museum of Jewish Heritage for hosting us today. I'd also like to thank the team of agents, especially Special Agent Chris McKeough, who's off to my left, up against the wall, who take tremendous satisfaction in the work they do to restore pieces of art and culture to their rightful owners. Chris, the passion that you put towards this effort is phenomenal and unmatched by any, so thank you for your work and doing what you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I am delighted that the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jeffrey Burns, is taking a leadership role in seeing that stolen art is returned to the rightful owners. And I'm particularly pleased that he has picked the Museum of Jewish Heritage as a place for that return. And the Assistant Director in charge of the FBI participated in this investigation, is here with us today. tracking down stolen logs is a difficult and complicated business. And we all have to work together to accomplish that. And I'm particularly pleased also by the wonderful laws that the United States Attorney made about me and my family. And I want to say that my grandson, Harry Morgenthau, is here today. He's going to carry on that tradition. We started cooperating with the U.S. Attorney back when Bob Fisk was the United States Attorney. And we were able to, in a complicated case, where money went to Texas and Iowa, and with the help of the FBI and a federal grand jury, we were able to trace those funds, which resulted in an indictment. And I said to the United States Attorney, "I'm returning this case to you. You made it possible for us to do this." And he said, "No, your people did the work. They're going to try the case." And the District Attorney's Office tried the case, got a conviction, substantial monetary return. I thought the case was over. And about 5 years later, I got a call from Washington saying, "I'm the Chief U.S. Marshal. Will you be in your office tomorrow? I'd like to drop by and see you." And I said, "Of course, of course." And he came in and he handed me a check of $1,200,000. I didn't know we were entitled to a dime. So that was a great conclusion. But there's been a long history of cooperation. And my crystal ball tells me that U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman is going to be a leader in the fight against injustice and returning stolen property. And for that, I thank you.
Okay, so now, Madam Solicitor, will you comment? No, we're first going to unveil the painting and then Madam Solicitor.
Okay, everyone stay down, all right? No, it's exciting.
This is the first time, Madam Solicitor, this is the first time you're seeing
You gotta get down,
the painting,
miss.
right?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sylvie Sulitzer. My grandfather, Alfred Baberger, as we say in French, was a painting collector and an expert. When the Second World War started, as many Jewish people, my family left Paris to escape from the Gestapo. When the General Goering stole the paintings from private collections as the ones from different museums around Europe, he needed an expert to verify all the paintings. My grandfather was required to do it, and of course, it was impossible for him to accept. So he decided to join the Maquis to escape. The Maquis were a rural guerrillas group of French resistance fighters during the Nazi occupation of France. When I was 5 years old, my parents decided to divorce, so I moved in my grandparents' apartment with my mother, and a brother joined us. As far as I can remember, nobody ever spoke about the war. It was taboo. My mother told me once that my uncle used to go out at night while everybody was asleep to collect the parcels parachuted by the Allies. After she died, I found an article in a French newspaper announcing that the man who denounced my grandfather to the Gestapo had been arrested after the liberation and deposed from his French nationality and his civil rights. Unfortunately, I do not know much more about my family's history at that time. After the war, my grandfather had a chance to declare the different things of his that were stolen during the war as jewelry and paintings. This history will never cancel what happened, but I'll always remember that thanks to the tremendous work of my lawyers, Imke Gillen and Anna Dost from the Von Trott to Solz law firm in Berlin, I'm here today. I want to warmly thank them. The American government, through the FBI and the US Attorney's Office, after investigating, decided that the paintings from Renoir, named Paysage avec trois femmes, belonged to Alfred Weinberger and so me today. It's an amazing decision, and I'm very thankful to be able to show my beloved family wherever they are that after all what they've been through, there is a justice. Thank you to the American government for inviting me to be here today, and thank you to the Museum of Jewish Heritage for offering such a prestigious decor. It's a great honor for me to be here. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
So we'll take your questions. Yes.
Do we know what the painting is worth?
I'd rather not speculate on the worth of the painting. Suffice it to say that Madame Sulitzer believes that it's priceless. Yes.
Can you talk about the agent who was involved in this, who was honored, gentleman standing there?
Certainly part of the art crime team, and why don't I have Bill Sweeney talk more about that?
So Chris, I don't want to get too much into Chris because he's an active agent, obviously, but the passion that the team shows and the work they do globally is unmatched. It's a small team. Oftentimes, they're not considered a priority work given all the other things we do, but when they put their effort forward, what you accomplish and what they accomplish with their partners around the globe in the U.S. Attorney's Office is amazing.
Can you spell his name?
I would butcher the last spelling of his name, but we'll get with you afterwards.
How did Ms. Sulitzer become aware that Christie's had the painting, and how many of her grandmother's paintings still remain inside?
Well, I believe she became aware when Christie's advertised the auction in 2013, but I can have Madame Sulitzer respond to the question of how many other paintings are out there that you're still trying to recover?
Actually, it's 4 Renoir and 1 Delacroix. Actually, still not found.
And when, if ever, did you see your grandfather's passion evolve in art? Was there ever a discussion and just
Can we step up?
Well, actually, my family on my mother's side was involved in art business. My grandfather was an expert collector. My grand-aunt created an art gallery, and my mother joined her to work with us. So, as I've been living with my grandparents since I was 5, I've been always in the I don't know how you say involved, yes, in the middle of the art life, I should say.
And did he ever mention those paintings?
Never.
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 Oh,
I was 15 when he died, so I suppose my mother knew about it, but
when
she.
did you know about it? When did you learn about those things?
When the Berlin lawyer cabinet contacted me, saying they've got a mission to find what my grandfather declared that had been stolen after the war, and they asked me if I would agree to work with me on finding those pictures, and I said yes, of course, but honestly I didn't know about that. So I discovered it the first time maybe 5-6 years ago.
Wow, so how did you react when you found out there was 25 of the best painters in the world somewhere that belonged to your family?
Actually, it's not that kind of reaction because I've seen many of those huge painter works at home, but it's just, well, of course it's a name, Renoir. Well, actually it's one of my favorite painters, but it's more the fact of discovering that there are people around the world, in Europe, in America now, that are concerned about what happened. So it was completely a surprise, a shock, because I never heard about that. I know that many things had been stolen during the war, and some of them had been given back to my grandfather the few years after the war. But as I said, the war was a taboo subject. We never talked about that, and I mean, I think it's a normal reaction when you've been through what they've been through. There's something you don't want to talk about, and the main purpose was to protect me. So it was not so long after the end of the war. I'm born in '58, so yes, ma'am.
How representative of others are you, of other families who were holders of art and jewelry, other things like property, not only in the areas where restitution is in fact, but also in the areas like Poland, like Belarus, where restitution has hardly begun, if at all.
Well-
And what part does the Jewish community, both the resident Jewish community in Europe and the Jewish community vis-a-vis the Mossad or other organs of the Israeli government have in returning such art?
Honestly, I can't answer your question because nobody contacted me, and the only contact I have is with Mrs. Dost and Mrs. Gillen in Germany. But when we started the adventure together, the first purpose was to make the French government recognize that all the jewelry and the paintings were stolen and not given back. So in 1999, Mr. Jacques Chirac created a commission to sorry for my accent, indemnize the victims of spoliation after the war. So the story started by that. So with the help of the German cabinet, we asked for the indemnization. But since then, I've never been contacted by anybody else. So
And I address the same question to Mr. Berman. How much cooperation
Well, our cooperation with other governments is actually pretty strong at this point. And of course, the FBI's art crime team is extremely proficient, not only in seeking out these artworks, but also assist in dealing with foreign governments in reclaiming them.
Could you explain how you became aware? I know it's kind of answered it for us, but can you explain how you became aware of the painting being with Christie back in 2013?
Well, I've been aware by my lawyers. So they sent me first an email saying we found it, and because as it's been exposed for a sale by Christie's, so that's how I knew that the painting was in America and proposed to be sold in by Christie's.
What do you plan to do with the painting now?
What do I plan? That's a very good question. I have to think about it, but, well, I must say that unfortunately I have to pay back the French government and the German government of the indemnization they give me for this painting. And actually, I can't afford it. So I've got to see if I can keep, whether I can keep it, but probably Christie's will have the painting to be sold in an auction.
Is that difficult for you?
Yeah, of course. I would have loved to keep it. Of course.
Madame Sophie,
Yes.
when you were about to pull back the drape and see the painting for the first time, what were you feeling?
My feeling was huge emotion, but to be honest, not especially for the painting, but for all what it means. And bring me back when I was a young girl living with my grandfather, my grandmother, my mother, and her brother. So that means it's more the symbol of the life I had with them and the symbol of the justice after the huge work everybody did to be this day today possible. I think it's when you're just a French woman living somewhere in the south of France, and then you hear that the FBI is investigating. Well, you can imagine it's a shock. For us, FBI is such a huge institution, so working for me, little thing in France, it's a lot of emotion because you really realize how people are concerned about what happened, because it's so easy just to say, okay, it's the past. Okay, we'll never forget. We can't forget. But it's very important that me, as a human being, as a Jewish person, to consider that you have people who work for the justice. It's more the symbol that the piece itself. It means a lot. It's really the fact of presenting the picture to you, the painting to you and to me. It's the conclusion of a tremendous work, and I'm very thankful to everybody, wherever, in Germany, in America, and it's a lovely story for me. I think I might write a book when I'll be retired.
Madame?
Yes.
So there are another 4 Renoirs and 1 Renoir.
Yeah.
And first, does anybody have any tips? Where did they go first step? Where did they went to? So where they were. And the second question is that given up each one to pay back indemnization?
I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, so if my situation improves, what I hope, because I just started a new business, that's why. So I opened a delicatessen in the south of France. Very different of the universe I'm coming from.
Yeah.
So I hope I'll be able to keep them. Honestly, I would love to keep them.
Does anyone know, is this piece of art in its original form, has it been refurbished in any way since it's been moved around for so many years, or is this its original state here?
We don't really know. You know, it's very hard to say because, as I've been told, the French government sold some pieces, some paintings around the world after the war, because it was too hard to give them back at that time. After the war, I don't judge anyone because I wasn't born, and we can't imagine what was the situation at that time. But after that, as far as they stay in private collections, they can be anywhere in the world. We suppose there's one maybe in Japan. We don't really know, so we have to wait till the painting appears to be sold or in an exhibition or something like that.
What do you have to say to the person that was in possession of it for so long?
Sorry?
What do you have to say to the person that was in possession of the painting for so long?
I hope he loved it.
Who was it? Who was
The last owner was a gallery, as far as I know, but I don't know about them. I never met them, so I can't tell you more about that.
Was this painting displayed
I don't know.
publicly?
Sorry?
Was this painting displayed publicly?
No, I don't think so.
So it's never, as far as you know, it's never been displayed?
No, I don't think so.
And the FBI or can mention where the painting was? Who had the painting? No?
I don't think it's very important anymore.